Relationships are just complicated, and you can not want to be with somebody anymore, but still find them attractive in other ways. And, it's complicated, right? Yeah. Can two people fall in love in front of the entire world and still keep the real story to themselves for over a decade? Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds managed exactly that. They married young, in a ceremony so private most of Hollywood didn't see it coming, and they divorced just as quietly a few years later. For more than a decade afterward, both of them mostly avoided the subject entirely, letting tabloids and unnamed sources fill the silence with speculation about what actually went wrong. Then, sitting across from her friend Gwyneth Paltrow on a podcast, Johansson finally let a little light into the room. What she said surprised even longtime fans who assumed the subject was permanently closed. In this video, we're going to walk through the whole story, the whirlwind romance nobody saw coming, and everything that came after it. The whirlwind romance nobody saw coming. When people talk about Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds today, the conversation almost always starts with the ending, the divorce, the years of silence, the eventual thaw. But none of that makes much sense without understanding how quickly and quietly the relationship began in the first place, back when both of them were still relatively early in careers that would go on to define 21st century Hollywood. Scarlett Ingrid Johansson was born on November 22, 1984, in Manhattan, the daughter of a Danish architect father and a mother from a Bronx family of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. She started acting young, landing her film debut in 1994 before breaking through as a teenager in The Horse Whisperer and then, unforgettably, in Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation in 2003. That same stretch also included smaller but critically loved work, including Ghost World and Girl with a Pearl Earring, roles that built her reputation as a serious young actress well before she became a household name. Ryan Reynolds was building his own career at the same time. Born in Vancouver, Canada, in 1976, the youngest of four brothers, Reynolds started out in local Canadian television before landing a breakout role on the sitcom Two Guys and a Girl in the late 90s, then moved into studio comedies with films like National Lampoon's Van Wilder in 2002. By the mid-2000s, he had shifted toward bigger studio productions, becoming known for a mix of comedic timing and leading man looks. People even named him Sexiest Man Alive years later, in 2010, right around the time his marriage to Johansson was ending. The two crossed paths socially around 2007, not long after Reynolds ended a relationship with singer Alanis Morissette, to whom he had previously been engaged. What followed moved fast by any standard. Johansson and Reynolds began dating in 2007, and the relationship deepened quickly enough that they were engaged within the year, a pace that caught even close friends off guard, given how private both of them tended to be about their personal lives. Johansson has described her decision to marry so young as something that felt right at the time, telling Cosmopolitan that she believed in trusting instinct, and that the marriage grew naturally out of real romance and a genuine desire to build a future with someone. They wed in September 2008 in a private ceremony in Vancouver, Canada, keeping the events so quiet that even close observers were caught off guard by how little was shared publicly. Johansson was 23. Reynolds was 31. For a couple who would later become two of the most recognizable faces in entertainment, the wedding itself remains one of the more understated events of either of their careers. No red carpet arrivals, no official photographer statement, and almost no advance word that it was even happening. The years immediately following the wedding were also the years both of their careers accelerated dramatically. Johansson joined the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Natasha Romanoff, making her debut as Black Widow in Iron Man 2 in 2010, a role that would eventually define more than a decade of her career. She was also building a parallel career during this period, releasing the album Anywhere I Lay My Head in 2008 and later winning a Tony Award for A View from the Bridge in 2010, a detail often overshadowed by her film Resume, but a real marker of how broad her ambitions were even then. Reynolds, meanwhile, was preparing for the lead role in Green Lantern, a film that would end up shaping his personal life almost as much as his professional one, since it was on that set that he first met his future wife, Blake Lively. The couple's rising fame meant their marriage was unfolding largely out of public view. even as both of their individual profiles grew rapidly, a contrast that became more noticeable once the relationship eventually ended. That privacy did not last because the marriage did not last, but it set the tone for how both of them would handle the relationship once it ended. Neither one turned the split into a public spectacle, and that restraint is part of why, more than a decade later, people are still curious about what actually went on between them. The divorce, the rumors, and the silence that followed. By 2010, cracks were showing. The couple separated that year, and in December 2010, they confirmed the split with a joint statement, saying they had decided to end their marriage after long and careful consideration, and that they had entered the relationship with love and were leaving it the same way. The divorce was finalized in 2011, closing the book on a marriage that had lasted just under 3 years. In the aftermath, tabloids filled in the blanks with rumors that painted Reynolds as controlling and Johansson as increasingly independent and frustrated, including one account describing raised voices during a visit to the set of The Proposal, one of Reynolds' films from that period. None of this was ever confirmed by either party, and both have largely avoided validating the specifics of those stories in the years since, which has left much of the popular narrative around their split built on secondhand accounts rather than anything either of them has stated directly. What's notable looking back is how little either of them tried to control the narrative in real time. Neither gave a tell-all interview. Neither used the divorce as material for a public feud. The joint statement they released was, by celebrity divorce standards, remarkably restrained, focused on mutual respect rather than blame, a tone that carried through the following decade, even as outside speculation filled the space they left empty. Reynolds did speak briefly about the toll the divorce took on him, telling Details magazine that anyone who goes through a divorce experiences real pain, though he framed it as something a person eventually moves through rather than something that defines them. He also joked about it during a rough stretch of filming in Georgia, listing a flooded hotel room, a sick dog, and a bout of divorce alongside a broken finger as the indignities of that shoot. A classic Reynolds deflection, using humor to sidestep a subject he clearly didn't want to dwell on. Johansson, for her part, said almost nothing publicly for years. She moved forward in her career and personal life without commenting directly on the marriage, a pattern that held even as speculation swirled about what had gone wrong. That silence extended through Johansson's subsequent marriage to French journalist Romain Doriac in 2014, through their daughter's birth that same year, and through the divorce that followed in 2017. Even as her personal life moved through an entire additional relationship and its ending, the Reynolds marriage remained something she simply did not discuss on the record, treating it less like a secret and more like a chapter she had already closed for herself long before the public had. The comment that reopened an old chapter. That quiet held for years, right up until an unscripted moment on a podcast cracked it open. The shift came in April 2023, when Johansson appeared as a guest on Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop podcast. The two actresses know each other from their overlapping years in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Paltrow having played Pepper Potts across several Iron Man and Avengers films, and the conversation drifted into personal territory when Paltrow asked how many times Johansson had been married. Paltrow initially guessed twice, and Johansson corrected her, saying it was actually 3 times, at which point Paltrow appeared to genuinely forget that Reynolds had ever been part of the picture at all, calling it something of a missed opportunity. Johansson responded with more warmth than anyone expected. She noted that the marriage hadn't lasted long, but that it existed during the earliest days of her friendship with Paltrow, around the time she was filming Iron Man 2. When Paltrow said they loved a good Ryan Reynolds in their house, Johansson agreed without hesitation, simply calling him a good guy. The same conversation gave Johansson room to reflect more broadly on how her understanding of relationships had changed since her 20s. She explained that in her earlier relationships, including her marriage to Reynolds, she hadn't yet learned how to set her own boundaries or identify what she needed from a partner, and said that only once she learned to respect herself enough to name those needs clearly did a relationship like the one she built with her current husband, Colin Jost, become possible. It's worth filling in the full picture of her romantic history that came up in that same exchange. After Reynolds, Johansson married French journalist Romain Doriac in 2014. The couple share a daughter, Rose, born that same year, and separated in 2017. Johansson then married Saturday Night Liv Colin Jost in 2020, and the two share a son, Cosmo, born in 2021, along with a second child born more recently. Jost has been a fixture on Weekend Update for years and has occasionally referenced his wife's career on air, and the couple's relationship has often been described in the press as notably low drama compared to Johansson's earlier marriages, something she is credited to simply knowing herself better by the time she and Jost became a couple. What made the Goop podcast moment land the way it did was partly its casualness. Johansson wasn't making an announcement or granting an exclusive. She was correcting a friend's math in the middle of an unrelated conversation about relationships, and the warmth toward Reynolds came out almost as an aside. That informality is arguably why it registered as more genuine than a scripted statement ever could have, and why outlets kept revisiting the clip for months afterward, framing it as the closest thing to closure the public had ever gotten on that chapter of her life. Where things stand between them now. There is no public evidence of tension between Johansson and Reynolds in the years since their divorce. Reynolds went on to marry Blake Lively in 2012, and the two have built a high-profile family together, sharing 4 children. Persistent rumors once suggested that Reynolds and Lively's relationship began while he was still married to Johansson, largely fueled by a report describing the two of them on what looked like a date shortly after the divorce was announced. Reynolds has offered his own account of how that relationship actually started, explaining in an interview that he and Lively were friends first, and that the real spark only happened around a year after they had both wrapped Green Lantern and were each single during an awkward double date where they ended up on dates with other people entirely. There has never been confirmed evidence that the relationship with Lively began before the marriage to Johansson ended. Johansson has spoken warmly, if briefly, about Reynolds on more than one occasion since the Goop podcast appearance, generally describing him in positive terms without going into detail about the marriage itself. Reynolds' life since the divorce has moved in a very public direction in other ways. He and Lively welcomed 4 children together, James, Betty, Inez, and Olin, and he has built a business portfolio well beyond acting, including Aviation American Gin, sold to Diageo in 2020, and the mobile carrier Mint Mobile, sold to T-Mobile in 2023. In 2021, he and actor Rob McElhenney purchased Wrexham AFC, a Welsh football club, turning its rise through the English football pyramid into a widely watched documentary series. He also returned as Deadpool opposite Hugh Jackman's Wolverine in the 2024 film Deadpool and Wolverine, one of the highest-grossing films of that year, following earlier hits like Free Guy and The Adam Project that cemented his reputation as a reliable box office draw. More recently, Reynolds and Lively have been at the center of a highly publicized legal dispute connected to Lively's film It Ends With Us, after Lively accused co-star and director Justin Baldoni of sexual assault and orchestrating a smear campaign against her, allegations Baldoni has denied. That situation is separate from anything involving Johansson, but it has kept Reynolds' personal life in the headlines well into 2026, a reminder of how different the public scrutiny on each of them has looked in the years since their own marriage quietly ended. Johansson's own trajectory has stayed rooted primarily in film. Beyond her Marvel work, she has taken on prestige dramatic roles in films like Marriage Story and Jojo Rabbit, both released in 2019, the latter earning her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, alongside a simultaneous nomination for Best Actress for Marriage Story that same year, a rare double nomination in the same season. She's since expanded into directing with her featured debut Eleanor the Great, starring June Squibb, which premiered in 2025. She also has a producing credit on 2024's Fly Me to the Moon and continues to develop projects through her production company These Pictures, including television series currently in the works. As of 2026, both have settled into long-term second marriages with young children, and both have built careers that dwarf where they were in 2008. Johansson has become the highest-grossing lead actress in film history, with her movies collectively earning more than $15 billion worldwide. Her estimated net worth sits between $165 and $200 million, built through Marvel paychecks, brand endorsements, and her skincare line, The Outset, which she co-founded in 2022. She was named the fourth highest-paid actor in Hollywood in 2025 and continues to work at a heavy pace in 2026, including her feature directorial debut and a new film with the director of Hereditary set for release through A24. Reynolds, meanwhile, has built his own empire well beyond acting, with business ventures spanning aviation, gin, and mobile service, alongside his continued Deadpool franchise work and his ongoing involvement with Wrexham, which has become as much a part of his public identity at this point as any of his films. Neither Johansson nor Reynolds has suggested any lingering animosity, and the overall picture that has emerged, especially since 2023, is of two people who married too young, learned from the experience, and eventually found a way to speak about it with more ease than bitterness. Johansson has spoken more broadly about the difficulty of being with another actor, noting the logistics involved in sharing time when two careers are moving at the same pace, or the strain that can appear when one partner's career outpaces the other's. Comments many outlets have connected back to her years with Reynolds, even though she didn't name him directly in that conversation. That, more than any single quote from a podcast, may be the real story here. Not a dramatic falling out, but two Hollywood careers that quietly outgrew a marriage neither of them ever tried to weaponize against the other, and two people who, by all public evidence, simply grew into different lives while leaving the door open to speak kindly about the one they briefly shared. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds' story is one of those that takes time to understand properly, because the most important parts of it were never the loudest ones. If this video moved you or taught you something you didn't know, please share it with someone who would appreciate it. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this and subscribe to the channel, because there are more stories like this one coming. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about Scarlett Johansson's incredible life and the choices she has made. We read every single one. See you in the next video.